So, for the second panel of the day, we're here discussing kind of the overlap or the intersection between ESG and financing. So we have two professionals in the space here with us. First of all is Eva Lewis. Eva Lewis is the CEO in City Jamaica, the only American partner with a physical presence at Jamaica. In her role as a city country officer, she's responsible for overall governance of the franchise, as well as client management and profitability. Eva is here to borrow to end the look. We also have Renee Oakes-Johnson. So Renee is a research, business analysis, policy and monitoring and evaluation manager at the Development Bank of Jamaica. Yes, she's one first. In this role, Renee is responsible for coordinating and managing research projects, policy development, product development, as well as a corporate planning and strategy. I'm extremely excited and it's an honor to be hosting this panel today. And I just want to get right into it. So my first question to start us off is, can you both start with Eva a little bit about your relationship in your current roles with ESG and sustainability?
Okay, good afternoon everyone, and I hope everybody's refreshed and not looking forward to a very boring finance discussion. It's not going to be that at all. And because let me say you're absolutely thrilled I am, and I'm very, very, very happy to see this young customer in CorpCare in very clear position on ensuring that Jamaica businesses do business better. So first of all, a lot of congratulations to Ali and the team for the really exciting social work. In my role as the head of City, which is responsible for client profitability as well as governance, and coming from a global organization like a City, which just like I would do many of the representatives of the organizations from Grace to Sanders, speak about today, our City has been in this space for many, many, many years, and obviously of an American bank and a large global financial institutions, and probably a so that we have been actually active in this space and made a significant amount of investment in this space. A few years ago, when ESG started to become something that was cascaded down into the Latin American space, I took the decision to drive thought leadership from Jamaica and perhaps the Central American and Caribbean level into our client base and by extension, hoping that it would actually cascade down into even lower level client base. And the response has been unbelievable. We obviously, as a guest in this country, and with probably of such experience and insights into the space, we want to make sure that across our client base and even further in terms of the support of the public sector, that we provide as much information and advice and support to drive the ESG agenda in Jamaica. Just to end, when you think about it, in terms of the numbers, the city has pledged $1 trillion to net zero commitments by 2030, and $500 billion funding to just the social side of the investments. And there's a very active program across the Latin American space of which we're a part in looking at both the social side and ESG side. So the commitment goes just as deep as many of the organizations that you've heard here today. And I think that I have to, without question, because I think it's the right thing to do, but also because it is so, it's a blueprint of what City is about. I will say, before I hand over to Renee, that, if you read anything about sustainable development, sustainable finance, any CEO that would no longer look from me, but my CEO, Jane Fraser, sitting in New York, any CEO that is not thinking about the risks associated with the environment and the risks associated with sustainable economies, is simply just not doing their job. they're just not doing their job. If they're not thinking about it from a risk perspective as opposed to, let us see what I can get out of this, then they're not doing the job. And I think if you start from that perspective, you see that what we have there today is a fuller reflection of the accountability. I think Cesar was the one that said it, that many of the organizations, not only today, but globally, are taking to this whole concept of ESG. So I start with here.
Other things. Good afternoon, everyone. I am truly excited to be here. I am the research lead and policy manager at the Development Bank of Toronto. And part of my role involves advising our stakeholders on key global economic and development issues. And part of the work that I am doing and have recently completed is the creation or the development of a sustainable development track for the Development Bank of Jamaica. I'm truly excited about that because of how important sustainability is for our country and also for the people. And one of the quotes that I found as I was thinking about coming here from one of the leading sustainable development economists, Jeffrey Sachs, and I'll just read it to you. Welcome to the age of sustainable development. We are learning the hard truth. The world economy has crossed the planetary boundaries of environmental safety. Will we continue to follow our blind economic models at growing threats to humanity, or will we choose a new direction and finally combine economic progress with social justice and environmental safety? And that was a really profound statement to me because we are across the planetary boundaries of environmental safety. And so sustainability is no longer a nice to have, it's not a trend, but it is a must have. And one thing that I have learned and is learning is that it's not optional. Sustainability is a need to have, it's a necessity. And so I'm just really glad to be a part of this panel to discuss this.
Thank you so much, and the passion is powerful. I think what I really want to get into, and I believe from both of your perspectives, is what are you seeing as the key driving forces for your organizations behind the sustainability push?
Okay, I think that again, if I go back to my original statement, if you think about a bank or a financial institution as an engine of an economy, right? And you take the view that there are risks to an economy being sustainable in the long run. And it's very difficult for us to sit here and think about the long run. Let me give you a statistic. It's going to take $5 trillion a year, $5 trillion a year to actually finance the sustainable development goals of the globe. And you think about that and you realize how awesome that number is, and then you pack it back into, if you're going to spend $5 trillion a year just to meet those sustainable development goals, then really and truly the world is at risk, right? And there's no point in having an economy, a country, a planet, if in fact that world sustainability really dreams at risk. So you have actors of financial institutions stepping up and recognizing that profitability has to be actually redefined and equated somewhat with sustainability. And then you also have, and I know many of the panelists before talked about stakeholders. Who are my stakeholders? Not only your shareholders, but your depositors. People who really want to actually be part of a financial institution that is doing the right thing, right? And then when you take again the focus on just risk, sustainability, you have absolutely, as Renee said, you have absolutely no choice but to join that bandwagon, so to speak. You ask yourself, when you look across the globe right now, many of the developed countries obviously are creating very, very significant regulatory frameworks around disclosures. And when we talk about disclosure, it's not quite nice to have paragraph in your annual report, but a disclosure that is measured, a disclosure that can be reviewed and retargeted, and in some developed economies, there are regulatory frameworks that have penalties associated with not meeting your regulatory permits. Now, we're going to Jamaica, so let's just go right back to where we are right before the Oscar said, and I want really to actually look at that. We're not talking about the large corporations who actually take money and invest it in ESG and say, have a fabulous ESG stakeholder. You're talking about the fact that if you only are addressing 10% of the private capital in Jamaica, we're not going to meet our goals. What we have to do is we have to drive through into the engine of the economy and support, and the financial sector has to support that, because the real engine of the economy are micro industries, cottage industries, small medium enterprises. How do they even begin to think about the cost of ESG certification, the cost associated, the how-tos, but not the cost of it? And therefore, today I think what I would love for Rennie and I to deal with is basically, how do we create a national framework with partnerships between the private sector, driven by the financial sector, and the development bank in Jamaica as the engine of the government, to create a framework that not only requires but incentivizes and provides the capacity for small, medium enterprises to get on board and actually feel that there is purposefulness in this journey, that there's a nation to save, that they are part of a wider journey, and that, this talk of carbon footprints and blue washing and green washing, that just goes over a lot of people's heads. This is about really having no choice, as Susan said. And therefore, for me, it's really truly about driving an economy and playing a role in Jamaica alongside my peer banks in establishing very clear guidelines about what we will finance and what we won't. And Citibank has basically said, we're not quite sure say possible with this by 2020. We can say that in developed countries, and we really say that here. How are we going to set benchmarks for ourselves, even in Jamaica, that are realistic and consistent and appropriate to where we are as a developing nation? And therefore, I want to, sort of, if you don't mind, segue to Ready, because again, we have to talk about, there are small businesses in this group, and people who want to understand how can I do my part? Where does that start? What are the real sustainable goals of a country as opposed to a company, right? And a country has to establish sustainable goals that start from eradication of poverty, food security for the nation, right? Saving the blue economy, oceans, and driving a sustainable framework that is accessible, understood, and affordable from a participation point of view. I think that, I think Rennie has a tremendous amount of passion for that in terms of the development bank of Jamaica and the kind of cohort from a development bank perspective that she's there to serve. So I'm going to head over to you. I want to steal your third and then we'll be passionate about that as well.
Yes, don't touch that. I think the driving force behind sustainability has to do primarily with the urgent priority of sustainability. That it's no longer a trend as I said before. And so one of the things that I think is also mobilizing that is our alignment with the global development agenda, especially being led by the United Nations in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals and also in relation to the Paris Agreement. And so to the fact that Jamaica is signatory to these agreements, it is no longer a need or just a wanting of doing it. We are obligated to implement and to get on developing our own goals and aligning our goals with a sustainable development plan. And so the urgent priority as well as the global development trend is also part of the push towards sustainability. We also look locally and look on our own national goals, National Development Plan, Vision 2030, that we want Jamaica as a place of choice and a place to live. Now, without sustainability, we may not have a place to live. And so it is urgent in that sense also, and that is especially from the start of the development bank, where we retrofitted our vision statements and our mandate and our mission. And part of our vision statement now includes that we are the driving force of sustainable development in Jamaica. And so that means that our intention is to ensure that we are driving and catalyzing and facilitate the type of investments that are needed to support development. And when we speak about sustainable development, we're talking about development not just looking at our profits, but looking at our triple bottom line, looking at the returns from profits, yes. And I know that because we serve the business sector, that is foremost, but also introducing and integrating the importance of ensuring that the natural economic system is in alignment with the effects that can be had on the environment, and also to be inclusive so that we have focus on social development as well. And so part of that work, and in terms of that thrust, is nation building. Jamaica needs this. And businesses need to understand the role that they play as a critical stakeholder in driving sustainability. It certainly won't be the DPJ, for example, who facilitates investment driving this. It's going to take the input and the intervention and the coordination and the integration of everybody, all stakeholders, all sectors, all priority areas, all players in the ecosystem.
Wow, the two of you are really much very easy to hear. So I'm trying to paint a full picture for our audience here. So a lot of us would think on banks in terms of how we get money from you, but you also need to get money somewhere, right? So how do you see the sustainability journey of banks and thinking that you're undertaking as impactful towards your ability to get money, right?
Well, it's so interesting you asked that, Dominic, because just yesterday I was in this is Climate Week, everybody's about to participate, and I was actually on an internal seminar with our clients. And picture this, right? In Jamaica, you're a small medium enterprise, and you're a business, and you back with one of the different institutions. Imagine walking into a bank and saying, I'd like to pay some money with one-time deposit, right? And they say, okay, ma'am, or gentlemen, we can offer you X, Y, or Z for 90 to 60 days a year. But if your business has a certification and you can demonstrate to me that you're ESG certified or you have disclosures to work, guess what? You get 50 basis points more. That's an actual product that is offered in other countries. Right, so you're thinking about at the end of the day, what is the incentive? The incentive is not only to lend you money and keep you, on key performance indicators because we're recording this thing to you. The incentive is also recognized that if you can put your money in me, right, and you can demonstrate that you are actually holding your own carbon footprint or your ESG principles, upholding them in a measurable way, then actually you can get more on your investment from an financial institution. Imagine a day when all of us have the capacity to demonstrate and certification, whether it be a retail client, a small micro business, or a small medium enterprise. We know that the large corporations can do that. So that's on the depositor side. And then we take further than we say our stakeholders are not going to support and keep the capital of any bank if they are not going to be able to demonstrate that they have a sustainability framework, that they're not committed to it, and that therefore that transcends into how we finance and who we finance, and upholding the goals nationally, but also of what we stand for. So picture this. Picture you, a small to medium enterprise, going for a loan at a bank. And the bank basically looks at you and says, okay, this is great, and so forth and so on. But guess what? I'm concerned about the fact that you are 80% of your workforce is men with senior positions. Because ESG also has a gender focus as well. There is an actual case study that I obviously did not confidentially present, that there was a loan given to a company that basically the company self-imposed a covenant of their loan that says, if I don't get to 50% gender balance in another 3 years, you bank have the right to actually step up my interest rate. So I'm self-imposing those standards on myself as another covenant because I am so committed to meeting sustainability principles that I have set about here. A bank that think about their life, a bank wanting to be able to do that, setting for its own self, principles of investment in companies, lending, taking the money in deposits, and then you have an ecosystem that is created with a true set of ownership and responsibilities and accountability. There are a myriad of reasons to do that. Think about investors overseas. I just came from a trip recently representing an issuer from Jamaica. And I went to 50 meetings overseas. And every single one of them said, what's your ESG framework? We can invest some of the money from our ESG fund. Or sorry, if you don't have it, we can't invest at all. So there are funds and access to capital is now being defined by basically how significant your ESG disclosures are. Now that's way into cyberspace in perspective. Probably that's relatable to maybe 2% of the companies in Jamaica. But you have to picture the day that those things are meaningful to everybody, to a micro company owner, to a small medium enterprise. And if we now sit down and start to think of the possibility of all of us living those principles, that's the only way that you're going to get the kind of nation that really describes, because it has to be accessible. Those principles have to be livable. And we as financial institutions, who are the engine of the drivers of capital to the very people that we're sitting around here, it's our ultimate responsibility to actually create frameworks, to actually make sure that those things happen. And I feel very strongly about the fact that for so long in Jamaica we have spent years crisis managing. But the government of Jamaica has taken a risk-based approach and a risk mitigation approach to these catastrophes in solidarity to what we discussed today. It is not sustainable due to crisis management. We finally have a chance to actually have an economy that is stable. And that stability needs to actually be rooted in a sustainability framework. And we, the bank, have to be the first up to create framework for the engine. And the engines are not the top 5 companies in Jamaica. They're big, but the engines are the ones that actually are the most fragile and the most susceptible to the risks associated with an environment that is not sustainable. So we have to work together and recognize that again, when he said absolutely zero choice. So imagine a day right? Imagine a day when those kind of things that when I pose on myself and say run back that I want to do this and I'm posing this look with myself and I'm back to start while this is fantastic. I'm going to get 25 basis points off or a point off or 2% or 3% off because you have done that. That's the incentive and survival structure that we want to create with. I can talk about the sports now.
We're going to get a little bit more specifically into what businesses there can do, but really I just want to put your sense here again. How is the DEJ vision, its ability to access financing, being impacted by the sustainability agenda that we give out?
Is that?
We lost them. Next.
Okay. Alright, so when you think about the requirements for accessing international funds, I think about it from the sustainable criteria that is being requested or required of us, even as a development bank speaking investments. And I will put it to use, as I heard people speaking, I thought about it through the lens of, or the metaphor of having a passport. And I thought that having a business may be equated to having a passport, but being able to travel is the visa that is needed. And accessing, you must have a visa, and so your sustainability criteria is that visa that is going to allow you to access. And that is so important because what we have to understand is the global trend that is happening where there's a global agenda to redirect and rethink development financing and finance overall. And so what you find then is that a lot of access to finance is being merged or married to the development criteria, especially as it relates to the sustainable development goals and as it relates to the criteria outlined in the Paris Agreement and so forth. And so what you find then is that if we are not thinking about adjusting and transforming, then we're going to find that we don't have the visa to travel or the visa to access the funds that are available. And it's so important for a small island country like Jamaica to have that open access because we do not have the money internally nationally. And so it's important for us to always have that availability or that accessibility to access funds. And I think that whilst that may be a driver in the whole initiative, I do think that outside of that, how important it is and the value it is for the businesses. Because I think I read in your brochure, sustainability is profitable. It is very profitable that we look through the lens. It's not just about accessing the funds, but also about in terms of the impacts and the outcomes that we can have, not just from the economic perspective, but from the social and the environmental perspective. And we also think about things like gender and gender equality and how we can introduce that into our day-to-day affairs and in our day-to-day businesses. That is something that may not cost a lot to implement, right? That may be a policy decision. And so what you will find though is that the multiplier effect of supporting gender equality has a lot more intricate development output than not supporting it. And so what you find then is that there are so much benefit to be derived from the path of sustainability, right? And I feel that it is very important for us to also consider how important it is for things like distribution of income and some of the sustainable development goals that relates to poverty and housing and so forth. distribution of income is important, and so supporting sustainability criteria or goals that relates to education or housing or the health system or whatever it is that you, based on the nature of your business, that you can support, is also able to instigate and catalyze and facilitate development in our country. And that, I believe, is so important, even though it may be driven by a global agenda.
Okay, so we'll just talk about a lot of things on that, right? But I love the analogy of the visa. So I want to come back to that authenticity. So if we're looking at our thinking from the perspective of Jamaican businesses. Not every Jamaican business is necessarily going to Citibank export money, but a lot of businesses are coming to the Development Bank of Jamaica. And what I want you to walk us through a little bit, given that you've identified, your investors, the source of funds that you have to now disseminate in the economy, is requiring the sustainability. What can you see, kind of in the case of Citibank, they're already actively doing this, but what are the requirements being put on Jamaican companies now to demonstrate sustainability to access funds from Citibank? And then I'm going to put the same question to you, how you can foresee that from the development part of Jamaica.
In terms of Citibank locally, well, for many years, in terms of looking at global governance, anything that would be considered as industry that had an environmental impact, and we have covenants to make sure that we're comfortable with the assessment. But truth be told, I think at the end of the day, there's nothing that says, right, if you have to do this, you have to do that. And I want to just look back to that issue of the visa, and it's always about what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Do you create a regulatory framework or environment for people to do things, carried on a stick point of view, or do you actually propose those things and have those things this roll it to it rather than the boss? So I answer to your question from a city perspective, I would dare say many of the banks here, there isn't a specific requirements to access funds. I think we're all talking about having an environment where we care about these things and we think about sustainability, but to reduce the client. The real question is, is that visa steeped in the requirement for a regulatory framework and policy that is very clear that at the end of the day, if you don't get, right? You're not a Norway, you're not a UK, and is that appropriate for the level or is that appropriate to our current economy where poverty exists, there's this huge social gap, there's a huge economic gap. So I don't think I can answer your question in totality other than saying that it's not that something is there and people can't access it. I think we really haven't framed it appropriately or completely yet, and that's why I think about the context of the possibilities. Imagine a day, that's where we want to get. Actually, we want the visas, but the visas are not sitting in some continent somewhere where you're going to want that. And then say, yes, I have this, give me money and it's 2% cheaper. Doesn't work like that. A lot of these things are privately negotiated. And when I mean privately, they're negotiated on the basis of, I have this dream and this principle, and I'm glad you're with me, here's 2% more, as opposed to a policy or a product, so to speak. I would say that.
Okay. And I want to comment to something about that, but Renee, so I know you're still in the research stage on the ESG and sustainability policy and the development bank, but how are you foreseeing this new plan affecting businesses' ability to access capital from the development bank to Jamaica?
Well, I can start the answer by speaking from the perspective of how it is currently affecting the DBJ in being able to access funding. And one of the things that we have realized is that there are a number of funds available, but without us being able to satisfy the development requirements or the criteria, we're not able to access those funds. And I think in July of 2023, I believe it was announced nationally that the Development Bank of Jamaica was accredited by the Green Climate Fund. And we have subsequently received our accreditation level at the highest level that is available to borrowing partners, and we're at the level of a multinational borrower on par with the World Bank, with IDB, and so forth. And this accreditation was not easy. The process was very lengthy. We had to put in a number of frameworks and policies that never existed before. We had to put in our grievance mechanisms, different information disclosure policies, we had our gender policy, etc. Right? So there are a significant number of policies that had to be in place before our application was even considered. And in addition to that, we also had to show on the ground what type of work we're doing and how we are actually in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals and all of that. So we were able to do that successfully, and that is because we had to put in place the requirements that were attached to the loans. And just a plug to say that the DBJ now has that facility that will be able to support climate change, and both from the adaptation and mitigation perspective, where we can develop products or programs up to US $500 billion. Now, that is access at very low cost, and certainly low cost. And so we're leveraging that opportunity for our country and for the region, because as it is now, we are regionally one of the highest level accreditation, so we'll be like a hub for other development banks in the region. And so that is just one example of how important the criteria was and satisfying development conditions for accessing funding. When it concerns us now on lending, of course, because there are development criteria attached to our funding on the funding side, then the unlending of those monies will have to come with a development criteria as well. And so it's basically that translation of the development criteria. So, for example, this funding facility will only support climate mitigation or adaptation activities. And that is one way in which our MSMEs or our businesses generally will be able to access funds using the criteria as attached to the loan. So there are other examples, like there is another example where you have a gender, you're not able to access certain gender funding or technical assistance simply because you don't have that fund. So we have worked assiduously to ensure that we are in compliance and we are transforming internally so that we can transform externally and be able to drive that sustainability agenda in the country. And which is what led to us actually developing our transformational sustainable development plan internally.
And I just to connect your question to Renee's answer.
Yeah.
So your answer really actually is, okay, the DBJ gets all of this money and it comes with conditions. Then at the end of the day, then on letting that money must come with the conditions. So the DBJ has got the visa, but it also is the consulate that actually provides the visa to other people. And therefore, if you're giving the other people, and the other people don't have a clue how to apply for the visa, then what's the point in the financing? And that's really truly the issue of the connectivity and how you actually implement policy. If you have this money that you can't even find people to lend to because they can't meet the criteria, how do we know that's an up to court thing, isn't it? Right? But and I'm very serious, where are the people that are helping the small and medium enterprise companies actually prepare themselves to present themselves to get this funding, right? Because the funding is available. There must amounts of capital globally that we can have access to. But if they, as the borrower of that capital, can't hold true to their covenants and say, I lent this money and I can measure the impact, whether it be on gender or on the environment or the coral reefs or on poverty or on food security, then how do you unlet this in a society that we don't have a regulatory framework, people don't understand it? This is unpacking at a very, 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 very baseline level. And I think, again, and I'm not putting a plug for you guys that you didn't pay me a commission for this. This is exactly the conversation that needs to be had with an audience that understands that if we don't make it accessible, and some of you want to access it, if I don't take a personal responsibility for my company, as small as it is, it will never happen. And it's giving people access in a labels, because people are intimidated by this whole concept. Very intimidated. You talk about it, and people out there looking at my paper today and saying, we're going to access all of these definitions and truth. When it just boils down to absolute and total desire to have or to live in a society and in a nation and in a world that actually, I love that adage that Ricky describes. It's the triple bottom line. It's no longer about net income. It really and truly is not. You have to redefine why we are there, right?
And just one last thing before we get through on here, I want to, bespoke preparation of this allows a redefinition company and the core mindset of the development back of Jamaica, right? So a redefinition from economic growth to sustainable development. I want to give you an opportunity to speak about that really quickly before we get to the Q&A.
Okay. Now, just to follow on from the previous question in terms of where we go, that requires transformation. We acknowledge where we are, that we are not yet there, but we also acknowledge what needs to happen and how we're going to get there. And one of the things that we saw necessary to do as we were creating this plan was to reconsider or rethink the definition of development. What does it mean? And that redefinition in terms of we also, in doing that redefinition, we took a stop and look on a timeline assessment as to how the definition of development changed over the years. In the early 1950s, we were concerned about simply economic growth because of the condition at the time. And then over the years, this transitioned into economic growth and change, and then we started to talk about economic development. And then that transitioned into human capital and human development, and then that transitioned into, from the UN perspective, the millennial development goals, and then now we have the sustainable development goals. And so one of the things that when we did that stock take, we realized that many of the businesses that we serve was still stuck in the definition from the 1950s. And a lot of our processes and a lot of even our reporting and the activities we were doing was more commensurate with the 1950s definition of development. So one of the things that we did firstly was to redefine development in terms of sustainability terms. And that is what was the foundation for our positioning on sustainable development and being the driver for sustainability. And that led to us changing our strategy from simply looking at the traditional economic models to adopting the sustainability model, where we not just adopt it from just our approach, but in terms of our definition and also in terms of our strategies, where we incorporated pillars such as economic development, social development, and environmental development. And that rethinking led us to look through triple bottom line in terms of our contributions to the environment and what returns on investment we have from the environment, or social returns on investment, and how critically important that is. And also, are we thinking to say that even when persons think about social and environmental development, they think that, well, this is grants, but how powerful it is in terms of profit side. Social and environmental is very profitable. And we also had to start that conversation because a lot of times when you think about these interventions, you think about just grants and this is a cost to us, but it's also profitable. And so in looking through those lenses, we were also able to move the conversation in terms of our strategies, where we have the alignment now with our sustainable development goals. So previously we were supporting 9 of the SDGs, and with the sustainable development plan we're now supporting all 17 goals in terms of our strategy. And this was a huge transition for us. And in addition to that, we also have a very national outlook. So we are in alignment with our National Development Plan, the Vision 2030, and how we are facilitating the achievement of that, because part of the DBJ's mission and vision is to drive development and to be that leader, that facilitator of development in the country, not just with our loans, but also with our stakeholders in our partnerships, in our research, in our collaborations, and just us being able to transform the ecosystems based on the work and the interventions that we're doing in terms of building capacity and providing technical assistance and so forth. And in addition to all of that, so as we are building out our sustainable development plan, we also realize that the transformation has to take place internally. So we have subsequently also reviewed and changed even our monitoring and evaluation framework to include or integrate sustainability factors. We have now introduced our ESG into the equation. Not that we weren't doing it before, but we are more deliberate and intentional with the goals and with the reporting. And that transition in terms of how we monitor and how we are evaluating ourselves and ensuring that our development outcomes are intentional and not just a positive consequence of actions that we're not taking. Because one of the things that we recognized in this process as we were going through is that we had a number of underreporting, a number of activities or initiatives that we were only looking through a certain economic lens, and we never realized the consequences that we were having and the development impacts we were having on the social and the environmental factors. And so one of the things that the ESG does and the sustainability lens does is that it allows you to be able to look through different lenses and be able to report and identify the total effect that you're having in a more holistic, comprehensive way. And so we're able to change our frameworks through those lenses. And one of the things that we're also doing is to revisit our organization, from operational efficiencies to our organizational structure and all of that, with the hope that as we transition, we will be transitioning the country and our stakeholders, our clients, and our system all together. And the attachment to that is we will be working with our business community to facilitate that transition, that transformation that is needed to ensure that Jamaica is the leader. Because when you think about even sustainability, Jamaica is the leader in many instances in terms of the work that we're doing, in terms of how advanced we are with certain things. A number of countries in the Caribbean has come to Jamaica, to the development bank of Jamaica, to understudy us in terms of the work that we're doing. But we're not comfortable with that. We're trying to transition, and so our support will involve just reviewing our capacity reviewing our products and our services and how that can contribute to the business sector. As Eva spoke about, the MSMEs is the engine of our economy, and so how we are able to support them, how we are able to help them to grow and to scale, and to not just remain a small business, but to transition from a small business to a large business is priority for us, right? And so that is part of the work that we are doing, and as we roll it out, we're excited about, the effect that it will have, because as we come back to the real importance of sustainability, it is that it is an urgent priority. It is that it is not optional, and that it has to become the way of life, the way of business.
Good job. And you thought finance was boring.
There's not too much left to listen after that. I do want to open it to a Q&A while we still have a little bit of time.
The point you mentioned about redefining profitability really stood out to me. And so I'd like to know from the Citibank perspective, as well as the perspective of other persons that you do business with, what is your definition of profitability, and do other companies buy into that definition?
The definition of profitability, I think of profitability as a return on investment that has a real impact in the economy in which it is capital has been deployed. We saw three main areas to its stakeholders, to the nation, but to the sustainability of the environment, which is amazing. It is located. So, in terms of profitability, it's not an ROI, it's not a number. It really and truly is, again, going back a bit to when I take that profitability to one, what am I doing with it? Am I reinvesting it in a sustainable way? Am I using it to buy or engage, even within my work, with the right categories of resources? Am I being gender? Am I paying people enter? First of all, it's actually 5 years ago went on a gender equality. Basically all women are paid absolutely for you to can rostered in that experience that actually don't fear when people will reset because we do the same jobs and not the same. So profitability to me is being responsibly make money so that at the end of the day you can actually reinvest that capital in that core responsibility that you have. Yes, your stakeholders and your shareholders are important. Look, it's a big bad move, Wall Street, we all know that. But to me, because I really feel very strongly about it, particularly the way Jamaica is concerned, that you have to be responsible in the reinvestment of that profitability is that.
Getting to that, I believe it brings me to it. So I think a lot of the conversation, it was particularly around risk and reward. I too, not so like devil's advocate, but I just wanted to understand as well if there was a form structure that couldn't be hurt as a possible risk of ESG. I know this was spoken about in terms of governance, which I find to be a pretty substantial ordinance here in Jamaica. And I really want to know if there are regards to that risk.
Boy, you hit me on the head if you're right. Governance gets the least attention because in many organizations there are regulations that prescribe you have a board, your directors have to take the proper and so forth, which is absolutely right. Governance is just as important. It's important in the public sector, it's important in the private sector. And governance is really truly about the structured efficient and the right efficient. So if you have a government structure, it's important into these principles that we're going the wrong way. And so you three of those things, environmental, social, and governance, have to be intertwined. Governance has to be, or if I was going, I think I would basically say governance, social, and environment, and I would call it together, right? Some of us look at it in terms of the security as well, but governance actually is, for me, is the pillar of this, because if you don't have the people and the board and directors and the people who are holding themselves accountable to shareholders saying, no, we believe in this, you do see a lot of power struggles. There was one famous city that one CEO who said that we have to manage the pace at which we actually do the investment in ESG, because I won't be around to see the results. Imagine that, right? When you think about CEOs and cycles that people are in leading organizations, you're taking all of this money and all of this time and productivity and investing it in something that is good, but doesn't provide them with any returns. Unless governance puts those things as part of a goal and a scorecard that actually is meaningful, then you have the exact power struggle that you talk about. And it is absolutely rare. And thank you for bringing that to the fore, because I think don't actually put the G first, right? It can crumble everything that we're talking about today. So this prescience, it is extremely important. Very important.
In that time for one word question. Thank you, Emily. Ladies, gentlemen, it was a pleasure hearing your perspectives, especially because there is a global lens with which both of you are able to share. My name is Crystal Thomas, and I represent Media Group Limited, and we assist companies with the storytelling around their brand, business, and social interventions. I heard you speak about governance, and it's something I'm intrigued on since the start of the conversations. I hear governance, but I also think government, and how at a global level you're seeing the role of governments in helping to manage the pace, to encourage, to incentivize, to create a social framework in which this kind of intervention is actually sustainable. Because it can be sustainable from a governance, a private sector governance angle, but ultimately these projects must exist in the larger Jamaican ecosystem, Caribbean ecosystem. What best practices are you seeing around the role of government in the governance and social environmental framework, as you looked at it just now? Both of them.
Sure, and I'm going to acknowledge that response, because I think you're a treat tonight. At the next fireside chat, because I think that if you do not stay for this conversation, then you've missed them out, right? I think a lot of what SAPRI is going to actually address today in terms of the role of governance, but in terms of the social, will be more than representing itself, and I won't speak for a day, that they recognize the responsibility that they have to actually create a framework that we can build on, that covers all of it. And of course, there has been a significant amount of legislation led by the government in terms of even their own public bodies, how directorships are done. They're actually leading the charge, and there's been a lot of legislation and change in policy in recognition of that. So I want to enrich my answer, because I think at the end of the day, SAPRI is living and breathing this every single day, and I think you're going to really and truly actually unpack the entire day with this conversation, because it's really about us. I don't know if you have anything to add.
And should we wrap this up?
No pressure, SAPRI.
Most certainly, I do agree with your point that there is a role for government to play, and I think the role of government is that the role that government needs to play is at every level, from the policy in terms of redefining policies and redefining our priority areas. One of the things in terms of even the sustainability perspective is the redirecting of financing and the critical role from even fiscal perspective that is going to play in terms of the effect on the transition. So the role of government is absolutely critical in building out the ecosystem, providing the support, the capacity, and the leadership for the transition that we need to see and what needs to happen upon the ground. Because while listening to the previous panel and you can see the leadership and the forward latest of many of the companies that we heard from earlier, that is absolutely commendable. But for you to see that holistically on a national level, it really will require the role of government and the leadership in that.
Very done. Thank you so much for the questions, and I just want to thank the panelists so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.